So now we are talking about this global movement, but also we're seeing more and more countries being a bit more protectionist. They're focusing inward. Now this is happening even within developed countries such as the U.S. Trump limiting travel, travel bans to multiple African countries. From now the business that you're in, which pretty much depends on people traveling abroad, how pessimistic, I would say, or optimistic are you about what's happening under the Trump administration and how he is limiting international travel, especially from this part of the world, which is where your business is based? How are you assessing this situation?
Look, on one side, I think it's difficult because, if you ran a country today and you had a certain amount of people that were coming in and crossing the border without paperwork, and it becomes difficult. Like, you have to think about what's in your country's best interest. Okay. Like, how do you protect and make, like, for me, I think about things with a capitalistic hat, right? So, like, if you're the CEO of a country, if you're the president of a country, you're basically the CEO of the country.
Pretty much.
And you want to sign deals that will increase revenue into your country. So, like, this is regional trade. So let's say you're the CEO of Tanzania. The deals you want to sign is like, okay, what are we importing from Kenya? What are we exporting to Kenya? What are we importing from Uganda? What are we exporting to Kenya? What are you importing from the United States? What are we exporting to the United States? You also want to make sure you can collect tax revenue on it from your individuals, because then you can provide public services, whether it's transportation, hospital, like education, to these markets. Yeah. So if you look at things directly, yes, it's difficult. The U.S. does have, many challenges to migration, and, I was privileged because I got a scholarship to the United States. I got to work in the United States, and I recognize that. And that changed my perspective and view on life. And if I didn't get the privilege to go to the United States, like Stanford gave out this full scholarship. If I didn't get the scholarship, I would have never been able to be exposed to certain levels of technology that I got to see. Now, with the administration, there are things that I think the U.S. does really well, though. Coming back to this, let's look at data, right? 46% of Fortune 500 companies in the United States are either founded or run by a migrant.
True.
52% of unicorns in the last 5 years in the United States are founded by at least one migrant co-founder. So, it shows you that there are very talented individuals who are migrants to countries. And this is why when people, whether they come to Tanzania, my home country, and come to build a business here, I actually support them. Like, do you know what? This is good, because if they do well, it will stimulate the local economy, and they'll have to employ people locally, and they have to spend their money locally, and it's a good thing, right? So I think there's many negative connotations that people look at with migration, but the truth is we have to always ask ourselves one question, and the question is, where would you be today if no one before you had ever moved? Okay. Where would you be today?
Wow, yeah, that is a tough one, but
which city?
Totally.
Because for some people, you might think somebody would be like, oh, I grew up in Morogoro.
Yeah.
My dad wanted to move to Dodoma. Okay, cool. Yeah. Then that person from Dodoma said, oh, my dad's wish was to move to Dar es Salaam.
Yeah.
And that person in Dar es Salaam says, okay, my wish is to move to Nairobi. The person in Nairobi, my wish is to move to London. Or my wish is to Dubai. The person in Dubai, my wish is to move to London. London, my wish is to New York. Everybody, privilege is relative.
True.
And everybody has a form of privilege where if you recognize what that means, like for that person in Dodoma, in Morogoro, it was just to move to Dodoma, right? And so I think, at the end of the day, even though that person moved, they still have to take care of the family back home.
Yeah.
And so there are benefits of what the migration does to these regions and how they can help stimulate local economies.
Okay, I mean, you have provided a well-balanced assessment. You've looked at it from a presidential perspective, why they may be forced to take such actions, but also the positive outcomes of having the free movement of people and goods. And in line with that, also, there's been a lot of financial squeeze when it comes to developed countries or development partners supporting startups, supporting businesses, NGOs here in Africa. Nala has been able. You have thrived on investors investing money, from seed funding to Series A funding, and up until today, you are a thriving business. Can you tell us about finding financial support for African startups in today's world? How difficult is it?
It is quite difficult to raise money. Raising money is not the reward. Raising money is not the prize. The more money we've raised, I mean, this music artist, Drake, says the reward for hard work is more work.
True.
And, you know, when we raised the $40 million last year, I remember one of my board members, he told me, he said, Benji, the chef doesn't celebrate getting the ingredients. What do you cook?
Yeah.
Like, what food have you served to people? Like, have you grown this, like, you know, when the chef is starting a restaurant, you don't celebrate getting the ingredients. Did you fill out the restaurant? Did the restaurant grow? Did the restaurant expand? Did you hire waiters and waitresses? Did you hire other chefs? Did you build a business that sustains itself and is self-sustaining and then that can grow beyond you? And, you know, when you raise money, especially for a region like Africa, it's tough. It's not easy. You know, there's people look at the region and say, oh, there's political instability, there's war, there's disease, there's, you know, all these negative connotations that come with the region. And, you know, you're constantly telling somebody, don't worry, like, listen, like, trust me, I'm going to be able to help you return the money, right? And when you take money from somebody, it's not charity. It's not free money.
It's not.
Every boss has a boss. I have a boss too.
True.
So when the pressure and expectations do increase at every single round, and, you know, my hope, and I have a lot of love and respect for any tech founder in Africa, and I want to see us grow as a region because I would like to see more tech founders doing bigger things. Like, you know, I tell my team, like, we're babies, we're irrelevant still, we're like a baby lion, right? We're not even a grown lion. We're not even, you know, how do we move $100 billion? You know, that's the type of thinking I tell the team to think with. And so, you know, with the region, you know, building in Africa is tough. That's the truth. Like, we launched in 4 countries in Asia. My hardest market in Asia was easier than my easiest market in Africa.
True.
And, you know, I can't blame the region. It's still a very young region, but there's also many politics and policies that are new and nascent. And my hope is that with Nala, we can start changing some of those for other entrepreneurs coming and asking, hey, Benji, how did you figure this out, and make it easier for them?
Yeah. So we're about to cross the half-year milestone. So in the first 6 months of 2024, Africa has been able to attract over $1 billion in startup funding, that is foreign investment into Africa. And of late, we have been seeing a lot of investors opting for equity as opposed to debt. So, but then now that has its positives and negatives. For as a startup founder, that means if you have to part away with stock from your company, at the end of the day, it might even dilute the vision that you've had for the company. Why do you think investors today opt to invest to gain equity than debt? Do they sort of have a mistrust that that money will be able to be paid back?
Yeah, I think, look, raising debt is tough, and like, people have been burnt from it, right? So like, someone like, oh, give me $10 million and I'll return 50. It's like, you know, and people have lost a lot of money that way on the debt side. So with equity-based fundraising, like, that's what we've done. The only fundraising we've done so far is equity.
Equity, okay.
Yeah, so we've never done debt so far. We'll be probably doing our first debt line sometime this year, but we've never done debt as a business. So that means my ownership goes down and down and down. Every time we raise money, my ownership is way lower.
Are you still the majority owner?
If you add all the investors, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. So now, how does that affect the way you want to lead the company? Because from a practical perspective, I have heard of stories, and I've actually talked to some founders who had to exit their company because they founded the company, but at the end of the day, when they got investment in equity, the investors had a totally different vision for the company, and which did not align with their vision, and they had to exit. So what is the risk around that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that happens everywhere, not just in Africa, but around the world. That's a common global problem. And I think it's not just with tech startups, I think it's every business, right? So, you know, whether it's you're investing in a hotel or like you're investing in a gym, and somebody wants to do, hey, we want to only have one gym and you want to have 10 gyms, and like, you're not aligning on where the company's going to grow. They're like, okay, what do we do? All right, you know, maybe it's time for you to leave the gym that you started. And it's tough. I've seen that happen to a lot of my friends who've worked really hard for maybe 10, 15 years on their company and left with almost nothing. And so that is a reality that we as tech founders face in our industry. Obviously, that's why I think it's really important to align with your board and be on the same page of like, this is the vision for where we want to be. And obviously, it will grow. So as the company changes, grows, the vision also grows and evolves.
Yeah, and in line with that, we are seeing when it comes to investment into startups in Africa, especially companies that are co-founded or led by women tend to attract less startup funding. I don't know where that comes from. If investors have less trust in women leading tech companies, you're in the space. Maybe perhaps you can share your perspective in terms of how do we address the unequal representation of women in the tech space, especially when it comes to stages of attracting funding. We have many women founders, but when it comes to attracting investment into the business, it drops down to 17 as opposed to 25% of the startups that have been founded or are co-led by women.
Yeah, look, I think it's a global issue, not just an Africa issue. I think it's a problem around the world where I think there's so many talented individuals that will never be able to get the funding that they need in order to build their business up. And I think it's a institutional problem that has carried on for many years, and slowly and surely, as you see more and more success stories, that will start changing. I mean, if it's not the same narrative, but if you look at the narrative of African founders in the US, tiny population, very small. And so African founders or black founders in the US even getting funding, tiniest percent goes to a black founder. So, I think when people start seeing success of that, where the founder of Calendly, it's a calendar app, is called Tope, and the company's worth over $1 billion. He's Nigerian in the US. We will see more of that. People are like, okay, do you know what? Cool, let me invest more in people that look. And then when Tope does well, he'll also invest in people that look similar to him, right? So there is, investment privilege is a real thing, and there's a huge gap that needs to be fixed globally. It won't happen overnight, but the way it happens is many things. Is okay, when more and more women are successful in the tech industry, it stimulates a whole also aspirational hope that somebody's like, do you know what, I want to be like this person, and also motivates people to get into the industry as well.
Okay. So you've touched a bit about race, and this is going to be a bit of a sketchy subject, but I want you to address it since you're in that industry. It is believed that for African startups or African tech-based businesses, for them to attract funding, there needs to be a white person within the team. When you go to pitch, they believe that your success rate is a bit higher if there is a white person as part of the team. Is that a myth, or that is the reality of the market?
I mean, look, the way I look at this question, because I was asked this question recently in an interview the other day, and the way I look at it is, wherever somebody wants to come and build a business, they should go and build a business. If it's as an African founder in Japan, amazing. Let's make sure that they do everything to succeed. If they have a Japanese co-founder or an Indian co-founder in Japan, we don't have the same discussion when it comes to African founders in the US or African founders in Europe. And, I do think there is a privilege gap for sure, 100%. I do think people who, let's say, move from New York to Nairobi will be able to attract more funding faster than somebody who grew up in Nairobi and lived there their whole life. Totally. And I think it goes back to a few things. I think one is people invest in people that look like them and behave like them and act like them. And so when a lot of the funding is coming from somebody who's from the United States, they're like, oh yeah, this person, I trust this person, right? There's naturally human bias. And I think that is a challenge. And I think a lot of founders find it very difficult. However, the flip side of it is some of the largest companies in Africa are locally funded. So for example, look at Flutterwave, GB, Nigerian. Look at Tosin for MoneyPoint, Nigerian. So look at some of the biggest unicorns, look at Ham and Majid from Chippercash, Nigerian and Ghanaian and Ugandan. Look at in Egypt, MNT Halan, I'm butchering the name, but 2 Egyptian founders. So I think, yes, there's one part of the story that talks about that, but I think there is examples of successes without that.
Okay. And most fintechs in Africa, or rather most startups are fintech in Africa. We're seeing a rise in health tech, agri-tech, and edutech. There is also this conversation that perhaps there is a saturation of a lot of startups in the market, that most of them don't get to thrive, don't get to survive. There is this excitement in raising capital, but at the end of the day, how do you ensure that it's that the business idea is sustainable within the market? Do you feel that there is, first thing is saturation of a lot of startups in Africa, but also investor fatigue?
Yeah, so fintech in Africa, in my opinion, will be the most funded thing in Africa for the next 25 years. And I can tell you like 1,000 reasons why. Even as we build Nala, like every single time we build it, I'm like, man, somebody needs to build this, and somebody needs to build that, and somebody needs to build this.
Yeah.
I'll give you examples, okay? And the reason why fintech is the most funded is because a lot of those founders don't start off trying to build a fintech company.
Okay.
So I have a friend, for example, who was trying to build a health tech company, and he was just trying to digitize health records for hospitals. But because like you go to this hospital here in Dar es Salaam, there's no machine that is, you go to that hospital there, it's like paperwork and so on. So when you go to get treated at this hospital, they don't know your previous symptoms and you can't remember them and so on. So like there's no digitization, and that's an opportunity, right? But then as he was building that company, there was no way of recording payments too.
Yeah.
And so he ended up building an integration with the bank just to do payment for reconciliation, because instead of calling manually and collecting cash and so on. So while he was trying to build a health tech business with digitized health records, he ended up building a fintech. Now, if you look at this in examples today, you like going to the gym. I don't go to the gym as much as I should. But if you think about it, if you ran a gym today, at the end of the month, what do you have to do? You have to call everybody to make payments. We don't have direct debit that exists in Tanzania. So it would be more efficient for you as a gym owner to be able to just get your account charged 50,000 shillings. Okay, you know, your gym membership is taken out, and then you proceed forward. Instead of giving the gym owner the work of calling every single person or texting every single person, hey, please pay your payment. So I think if you look at the region, so many businesses would be impacted at scale if fintech services like that existed for direct debits, for different types of lending, for like, you know, revenue-based financing, so or B2B business payments. And I think if you look at the banking sector, a lot of the banks are really old, 20, 30 years old, legacy technology. Who's enabling digital services to be built on top of these things? If you look at services that you use, like Instagram and TikTok, in Africa, you have a lot of creators that can get paid directly from Instagram because there's not one API that connects 50 countries in Africa through one API that disperses into Tigo Peso wallets, M-Pesa wallets, Airtel wallets, MTN wallets across the region. So think about that whole economy of people that can get paid today and what will happen till that happens. So I think the opportunity in fintech is massive, and it's going to be even larger from where it is today.
Okay, so you've talked about, you know, the fact that we use a lot of Western made or Western based innovations. What's your view about Africa's proprietary platforms innovations that are owned by Africans, that for us to ensure that, you know, moving forward we have that tech independence as well? What is your view about that?
What do you mean by tech independence?
So tech independence is that we create our own proprietary platforms, our own innovations, and not dependent on Western-made innovations, which kind of limits our...
Yeah, well, I would challenge that. I don't know if it matters.
Okay.
Like, does it matter? Like, if you really think about it, what, do you want a Tanzanian Instagram? Like, okay, make a Tanzanian Instagram. Like, you know, I think we're limiting the ambition and opportunity for us. I know we look at China and be like, oh, well, there's WeChat Pay and all this other stuff there, and like, what are we doing? But our market is so small compared to China. Like, GDP per capita is not uncomparable. If our market was growing like that, then maybe sure, we can like launch something. I do think there should be some more homegrown stuff for sure, and I'm in favor and support, but I don't think it should be this or that. I think it should be both.